Picture this: a lone warrior standing against impossible odds, armed not with brute strength alone, but with a weapon so far ahead of its time that it defies the very logic of the battlefield. Across the ancient and medieval world, ordinary soldiers became legends not because of sheer numbers or luck, but because of groundbreaking innovations that turned them into something closer to mythical forces of nature. These weren't just tools of war, they were masterpieces of ingenuity designed to shift the balance of power in ways no one saw coming. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 20 of history's most deadly and unexpected advancements, the kind that didn't just change battles, but rewrote the rules of warfare itself. Think about the last time you heard a story of an underdog triumphing against all odds. Now imagine that story playing out not just through courage or strategy, but through the sheer brilliance of technology centuries ahead of its time. From the echoing clash of Bronze Age battlefields to the thunderous charge of medieval knights, every era had its game changers, weapons so effective, so terrifying, that they transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary. What made these innovations so powerful? How did a simple idea, forged in fire and necessity, become the difference between victory and annihilation? The answers lie in the minds of ancient engineers, blacksmiths, and tacticians who dared to rethink the impossible. This isn't just a list of old weapons gathering dust in history books. These are the inventions that redefined empires, toppled kingdoms, and carved their names into the annals of warfare. We're talking about arrows that could pierce armor like paper, siege engines capable of reducing towering walls to rubble, and battlefield tactics so cunning they felt like magic to those who faced them. Each one of these innovations carried a secret, a spark of genius that turned everyday soldiers into something far greater. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey through time, uncovering the hidden stories behind the tools that didn't just win battles, they changed the course of history forever. Imagine the sheer terror of facing an enemy whose very breath seemed to spew flames across the waves. That was the nightmare Greek fire unleashed upon anyone daring to challenge the Byzantine Empire. This wasn't just fire, it was liquid terror, a concoction so advanced that its recipe was guarded like a state secret, known only to a select few. Even today, historians and chemists still debate its exact ingredients, though hints suggest a volatile mix of petroleum, quicklime, and other mysterious compounds that allowed it to burn on water, defying nature itself. The true genius of Greek fire lay in its delivery. Byzantine engineers designed specialized brass pumps and siphons, mounted on warships, that could spray this infernal liquid in arcs over 100 feet. Picture the horror of enemy crews watching fire leap from vessel to vessel, clinging to sails, decks, and even the water around them, leaving no escape. Entire fleets were reduced to ash in moments, a spectacle so devastating it became legend. The psychological impact was just as potent as the physical destruction. Opposing navies would often retreat at the mere sight of Byzantium's flame-spewing ships, knowing engagement meant certain doom. What made Greek fire revolutionary wasn't just its brutality, but its strategic brilliance. In an era where naval battles were decided by ramming and boarding, this weapon turned warfare on its head. The Byzantines didn't need to close the gap. They could annihilate enemies from a distance, controlling the seas with unmatched dominance. Its influence echoes through history, inspiring later innovations like medieval flamethrowers and even modern incendiary weapons. Yet none ever replicated its terrifying mystique, a testament to the Byzantine Empire's unrivaled mastery of ancient warfare's most fearsome art. While Greek fire dominated the seas, another innovation was carving out an empire on land, one thrust at a time. The Roman gladius wasn't just a sword, it was the heartbeat of an entire military machine, a weapon so perfectly tailored to its purpose that it became synonymous with Roman dominance. At first glance, its short, unassuming blade might seem underwhelming compared to the flashy longswords of later eras, but that was the genius of it. Every inch of this weapon was engineered for maximum efficiency in the chaos of close-quarter combat. The gladius excelled where longer weapons faltered. In the tight, disciplined ranks of a Roman legion, space was precious. There was no room for sweeping slashes or dramatic swings. Instead, the gladius allowed soldiers to strike with deadly precision, delivering rapid thrusts to vital areas, a technique far deadlier than wild hacking. Its double-edged design meant every movement counted, whether parrying an enemy's blow or driving the point home with lethal force. This wasn't just a tool for fighting. It was an extension of Roman discipline itself, turning each soldier into a cog in an unstoppable war machine. What truly set the gladius apart was how it shaped battlefield tactics. Roman legions didn't just charge, they advanced in locked formations, shields interlocked, gladii poised to stab through gaps in enemy defenses. Against foes relying on brute strength or longer weapons, this methodical approach was devastating. Tribesmen wielding spears or axes found themselves outmaneuvered, their attacks deflected by Roman shields while the gladius struck with surgical precision. From the forests of Germania to the deserts of Mesopotamia, this weapon became the symbol of Roman conquest, proving time and again that efficiency trumped sheer force. The legacy of the gladius echoes far beyond ancient battlefields. Modern military close combat training still emphasizes controlled, precise strikes over wild swings, a direct descendant of Roman doctrine. Even the phrase gladiator, derived from this very sword, evokes images of disciplined, relentless combat. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a philosophy, one that transformed ordinary men into the architects of history's most formidable empire. And that's the real power of innovation, not just in the metal of the blade, but in the minds of those who wielded it. Standing at nearly 6 feet tall, the English longbow wasn't just a weapon, it was a revolution carved from yew wood. Unlike the crossbows of the time, which required mechanical loading, this towering masterpiece of simplicity harnessed raw human strength and years of relentless training. From the age of 7, boys in England would begin the grueling process of mastering the longbow, their bodies gradually reshaping to accommodate its staggering 150-pound draw weight. By adulthood, these archers could launch arrows with such force that they punched through plate armor at 200 yards, turning the tide of battles before swords ever clashed. The Battle of Agincourt in 1415 became the longbow's defining moment. Outnumbered and bogged down in mud, the English faced a French army of heavily armored knights, the medieval equivalent of tanks. But what followed wasn't a clash of steel, it was a storm of arrows. Thousands of shafts darkened the sky, each one capable of finding gaps in armor or piercing straight through it. The French charge, designed to overwhelm, instead became a slaughter. Horses fell, knights stumbled, and the very pride of French nobility was humbled by peasants wielding sticks and string. What made the longbow so transformative wasn't just its power, but its accessibility. Unlike the expensive armor and war horses of knights, a longbow could be made by any village carpenter. This democratization of force meant even the lowest-born archer could topple the highest-born lord, a social upheaval as much as a military one. Tactics had to evolve too. Armies could no longer rely on sheer numbers or heavy cavalry. they had to account for the lethal rain of arrows that could decimate ranks from afar. The longbow's legacy lingers in the DNA of modern warfare. It foreshadowed the age of ranged combat where distance and precision trumped brute force. Even today, the phrase, "the longbow's shadow," describes how a single innovation can redefine an entire era. It wasn't just a weapon, it was the great equalizer, proving that sometimes the simplest tools wielded by disciplined hands can rewrite history. The Mongol Composite Bow wasn't just a weapon, it was the soul of an empire built on speed and terror. Unlike the English longbow's towering frame, this recurved masterpiece was compact enough to fire from horseback, yet its layered construction of wood, horn, and sinew packed enough power to punch through armor at staggering distances. Every curve of its design served a purpose, storing energy like a coiled spring to launch arrows with lethal precision, even at full gallop. This wasn't just engineering, it was poetry in motion, turning nomadic herders into the most unstoppable force the medieval world had ever seen. Picture the chaos of facing a Mongol horde, thundering hooves, dust clouds, and then, without warning, a hail of arrows raining down from every direction. Unlike traditional armies that clashed in static lines, Mongol warriors attacked like a hurricane, circling their enemies while unleashing volleys with terrifying accuracy. Their bows gave them unrivaled versatility. At close range, armor-piercing bodkin points shattered defenses, while at longer distances, lighter arrows disrupted formations like a swarm of deadly insects. And because each warrior carried multiple quivers, the barrage never seemed to end. What truly set the Mongol bow apart was its symbiotic relationship with horsemanship. From childhood, Mongol riders trained to shoot in rhythm with their horse's gait, releasing arrows at the exact moment all four hooves were off the ground for maximum stability. This harmony of man, beast, and weapon created a mobile artillery platform that could strike and vanish before foes could react. Even the famed knights of Europe, weighed down by heavy armor, stood little chance against an enemy that refused to stand still. The bow's influence extended far beyond battle. Its lightweight design meant entire armies could travel swiftly across vast steppes, resupplying arrows from herds of following sheep and goats whose bones and tendons became fresh ammunition. This logistical brilliance allowed the Mongols to sustain campaigns over distances that would cripple other armies. From the walls of Beijing to the gates of Budapest, the composite bow didn't just win battles, it forged history's largest contiguous empire, proving that innovation wasn't always about size, but the perfect marriage of technology and tactics. Centuries later, modern engineers still marvel at its construction. The glue, boiled from fish bladders, remained flexible in freezing temperatures, while the layered materials resisted warping in the brutal humidity of Asian summers. Even the silk bowstrings, often carried as spare threads woven into warriors' clothing, were a stroke of genius. Every detail was honed by generations of nomadic life, where survival depended on adaptability. The Mongol bow wasn't just a tool of conquest, it was the ultimate expression of a culture that moved, fought, and thrived on the open plains. A reminder that sometimes the greatest superweapons aren't the loudest or largest, but the ones that become an extension of the human spirit. While the Mongol bow required a lifetime of mastery, the Chinese crossbow achieved something radically different. It turned warfare into a numbers game. During the Warring States period, when rival kingdoms clashed in endless cycles of conquest, this unassuming weapon became the great equalizer. Unlike traditional bows that demanded years of training to build muscle and precision, the crossbow's genius lay in its mechanical trigger. With a simple pull of a lever, even a farmer conscripted just days before could deliver a bolt capable of piercing armor at 100 paces. This wasn't just innovation, it was industrialization of death on a scale the ancient world had never seen. What set the crossbow apart was its assembly line production. Chinese armories standardized parts, crafting interchangeable triggers and stocks that could be mass-produced like pottery. Imagine entire warehouses filled with identical components, ready to be assembled at a moment's notice, a concept so advanced it wouldn't be matched until the firearm factories of the industrial age. Suddenly, kingdoms could equip thousands of soldiers with identical weapons, creating waves of firepower that overwhelmed even the most disciplined foes. The psychological impact was just as profound. Enemy formations, accustomed to weathering sporadic arrow volleys, now faced relentless, synchronized barrages that turned battlefields into killing zones. The crossbow's design secrets were as ingenious as its deployment. Some models featured bronze triggers with intricate safety mechanisms, preventing accidental firing, an ancient precursor to modern firearm engineering. Others employed repeating mechanisms, allowing archers to load and fire multiple bolts without breaking stance. But perhaps most devastating was the sheer variety of ammunition. Armor-piercing bolts with square tips could punch through layered leather and iron, while barbed variants caused horrific wounds that crippled morale. Some armies even used firebolts, wrapping arrowheads in oil-soaked cloth to ignite enemy fortifications from a distance. This democratization of force reshaped power structures across China. No longer was military might reserved for aristocratic warriors trained from birth. A peasant handed a crossbow could topple a noble knight with a single well-placed shot. The ripple effects extended beyond the battlefield, fueling social upheaval as old hierarchies crumbled under the weight of this technological shift. Even the legendary terracotta army, buried with China's first emperor, stood guard with crossbows at the ready, a silent testament to the weapon's role in unifying the kingdom. Centuries later, the crossbow's influence would echo through European battlefields, where its descendants played pivotal roles in sieges like the Crusades. But none ever matched the scale or sophistication of the original Chinese designs. Modern military theorists still study its impact, recognizing it as the first true weapon of mass production. A reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary innovations aren't about making warriors stronger, but about making weapons accessible to all. In the end, the crossbow didn't just change how wars were fought. It changed who could fight them, rewriting the rules of power with every bolt loosed into history. Among the shifting sands of ancient Persia, one weapon stood as the backbone of history's first professional army, the Dory spear, wielded by the legendary immortals. Unlike the crude spears of conscripted farmers, these were instruments of precision, their iron tips balanced by bronze butt spikes that turned every motion into a potential killing stroke. What made the Dory devastating wasn't just its craftsmanship, but how it functioned within the immortals' infamous formation. Picture a wall of overlapping wicker shields, each one large enough to cover a man from chin to ankle, and behind them, a forest of spear points protruding like the quills of a porcupine. Any enemy charging that line faced an impossible choice: dodge left and meet a spear, dodge right and meet another. The genius of the immortal system lay in its seamless adaptability. Each soldier carried a spear roughly 7 to 9 feet long enough to outreach most swords and axes, yet short enough to maintain tight formations. When advancing, the front rank would crouch behind their shields, presenting an armored wall, while the second rank leveled their spears over the shoulders of the first. The result, a moving fortress that could advance relentlessly, skewering anything in its path. And if a spear shattered or an immortal fell, another would instantly step forward to take his place, a practice so flawless it gave rise to their mythical reputation of never diminishing in number. But the Dory's real power emerged in combination with other Persian innovations. Unlike Greek hoplites, who relied on brute force to push through enemy lines, the Immortals trained to exploit gaps with surgical precision. Their spears allowed them to stab over shields, hook limbs, or even flip opponents off balance with the butt spike. Historical accounts describe how they'd rotate entire sections of their formation mid-battle, keeping fresh warriors at the front while exhausted ones recovered. An early example of tactical rotation that wouldn't be seen again until the Roman Manipular legions. The psychological impact of facing the Immortals was as potent as their physical dominance. Their name, coined by Greek historians, stemmed from the illusion that their ranks never dwindled, a carefully maintained deception where fallen warriors were swiftly replaced by reserves identically armored, creating the eerie impression of an unkillable force. Even their equipment was standardized down to the last detail, from the polished scales of their armor to the uniformity of their spears, projecting an image of inhuman perfection. When these warriors marched, the very ground seemed to tremble under the synchronized rhythm of 10,000 spears tapping against shields, a sound designed to unnerve enemies before the first blow was struck. Beyond the battlefield, the Dory's influence rippled through military history. Alexander the Great would later adopt modified Persian spear tactics for his own phalanxes, while the concept of a standing professional army became the gold standard for empires from Rome to Byzantium. Modern military theorists still study the Immortals' use of psychological warfare and unit cohesion, principles that echo in today's special forces training. Yet perhaps their greatest legacy was proving that discipline and unity could transform simple weapons into something extraordinary, a lesson that resonates every time an underdog force, outnumbered but undaunted, stands firm behind a wall of shields and steel. The Copish wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement carved in bronze, a blade so distinctive that its silhouette became synonymous with Egyptian might. Unlike the straight swords of neighboring civilizations, this sickle-shaped marvel combined the brute force of an axe with the precision of a sword, creating a hybrid that dominated close-quarters combat. With a curved design sharpened along the outer edge and a hooked tip, it could slash through flesh, hook shields to disarm enemies, or even pull opponents off balance with a single fluid motion. When a pharaoh raised a Copish in battle, it wasn't merely a tool of war, it was a symbol of divine authority, believed to channel the fury of gods like Ra and Horus onto the battlefield. What made the Copish so terrifying was its versatility. The inward curve allowed warriors to exploit angles that straight swords couldn't, striking around shields or yanking weapons from an opponent's grip. Historical reliefs depict Egyptian soldiers wielding it with one hand while gripping a shield in the other, a testament to its balance and maneuverability. But its deadliest feature lay in the weighted tip, a design quirk that amplified the force of each swing, enabling blows capable of cleaving through bone or splintering wooden shields. Unlike the Gladius, which relied on disciplined thrusts, the Copish rewarded fluid, almost artistic motion, turning combat into a lethal dance. The weapon's cultural significance ran as deep as its cuts. Tomb paintings and temple carvings show pharaohs like Ramses the Great brandishing the Copish against the Hittites or Nubians, immortalizing it as a tool of conquest and royal prestige. Some blades were even inscribed with prayers or the names of deities, transforming them into sacred objects. This wasn't just battlefield utility, it was psychological warfare. Imagine facing an Egyptian army where every flick of a Copish seemed blessed by the gods, a sight designed to unravel enemy morale before the first clash. Yet the Copish's greatest legacy might be its influence on later weapons. Centuries after its heyday, curved blades like the Greek kopis and the Nepalese kukri echoed its design, proving that innovation often circles back to what works. Even the famed scimitars of the Islamic Golden Age owed a debt to this ancient precursor, adapting its curve for cavalry strikes. Modern metallurgists still study Copish construction, marveling at how Egyptian smiths balanced hardness and flexibility in an era before tempering techniques were fully understood. In the end, the Copish was more than metal. It was a masterpiece of ergonomics and intimidation, a weapon that shaped not just battles but the very identity of an empire. From the banks of the Nile to the frontiers of the Levant, it left a mark as enduring as the pyramids themselves. And that's the hallmark of true innovation, when a single design transcends its time, echoing through history long after its last swing. While other empires relied on starvation or brute force to breach city walls, the Assyrians approached siege warfare like engineers solving a puzzle, and their solution was nothing short of revolutionary. The siege tower wasn't just a tool, it was a mobile fortress, a multi-story wooden giant on wheels that rolled across battlefields like something out of mythology. Standing as tall as the walls they were built to conquer, these behemoths shielded attackers with layered oxhide coverings soaked in vinegar to resist fire, while arrow slits allowed archers inside to rain death on defenders. For the first time in history, soldiers could cross open ground and scale fortifications without being picked off like targets in a shooting gallery. What made these towers truly groundbreaking was their adaptability. Assyrian engineers designed them to be dismantled and transported by mule trains, then reassembled at each new battlefield, an early example of modular military technology. Historical reliefs from Nineveh show towers with massive battering rams suspended on chains at their base, allowing crews to swing them rhythmically against gates while upper levels disgorged warriors onto the walls. This wasn't just a single weapon, it was a combined arms system centuries ahead of its time. The psychological impact was as calculated as the engineering. Imagine being a defender watching these monstrous structures creep forward, each turn of their wheels amplifying the dread. Unlike simple ladders that could be pushed away, siege towers couldn't be stopped once they reached the walls. Their very presence shattered morale, often convincing cities to surrender before the first Assyrian soldier set foot inside. When King Sennacherib besieged Lachish in 701 BC, his army deployed dozens of these towers simultaneously, a coordinated assault that overwhelmed even the most prepared fortifications. But the real genius lay in how these towers transformed ordinary soldiers. No longer did attackers need to be elite warriors. The tower's design turned conscripts into a unified machine. Archers provided covering fire from above while sappers worked below, all synchronized like gears in a clock. This systematic approach to siegecraft became the blueprint for future empires, from Alexander's mobile siege ladders to Rome's infamous Helepolis. Even medieval trebuchets and Renaissance bastion designs owed a debt to those first Assyrian engineers who looked at a wall and saw not a barrier, but a challenge to be dismantled. Modern military historians still study Assyrian siege tactics for their ruthless efficiency. Their towers weren't just about height, they were about control, dictating the terms of engagement while neutralizing every defensive advantage. In an era where most battles were won by stamina or courage, the Assyrians proved that innovation could render even the mightiest walls obsolete. And that's the enduring lesson of the siege tower. Sometimes the greatest superweapon isn't a blade or a bow, but the audacity to rethink the battlefield itself. Imagine standing on a battlefield when suddenly the horizon darkens not with storm clouds, but with 18 feet of polished ash wood tipped in iron, leveled toward you by a wall of disciplined warriors. This was the Sarissa, the Macedonian superweapon that turned infantry formations into something closer to a moving fortress. Unlike the shorter spears of Greek hoplites or Persian immortals, these monstrous pikes extended so far forward that the front rank's weapons projected well beyond the fourth rank behind them. The result, a bristling hedge of death that could skewer charging cavalry or shatter enemy lines long before they got within striking distance. Alexander the Great didn't just wield the Sarissa, he orchestrated it. Each soldier in his phalanx trained relentlessly to maneuver these unwieldy spears in perfect synchronization, their movements honed to a rhythm that turned individual fighters into cogs of a single, unstoppable machine. The secret wasn't just the weapon's length, but how it was used. While opponents relied on brute force or heroic duels, Macedonian drill masters turned combat into a science. Ranks would advance with sarissas angled slightly downward, creating a deadly incline that could impale horses mid-charge. Then, on command, the front rows would lift their pikes to chest height, transforming the formation into a porcupine of iron that no infantry dared approach. What made the Sarissa truly revolutionary was its adaptability. Unlike static shield walls, Alexander's phalanxes could pivot, shift depth, or even separate into smaller units while maintaining their lethal cohesion. Historical accounts describe how at the Battle of Gaugamela, his troops seamlessly opened gaps in their lines to let Persian chariots charge harmlessly through, only to close ranks again and slaughter the disoriented crews. This wasn't just strength, it was tactical ballet choreographed down to the last footstep. And at the heart of it all was the Sarissa, its reach allowing Macedonians to control engagements like puppeteers pulling strings from a safe distance. The weapon's influence outlived Alexander himself. Later Hellenistic kingdoms lengthened sarissas to absurd 22-foot variants, while Roman legions, though they eventually abandoned the pike for Gladius and Pilum, studied Macedonian tactics to refine their own manipular formations. Even Renaissance military theorists pored over ancient texts to recreate phalanx principles, proving that some innovations echo across millennia. Yet none ever quite matched the original's terrifying elegance. There's a reason Alexander's empire stretched from Greece to India, and it wasn't just his genius, it was the forest of sarissas that cleared his path, one unstoppable advance at a time. Buried in the soil of Scandinavia and along the rivers of medieval Europe, a handful of ancient swords bear a name that still sends shivers down the spines of historians Ulfbert. These weren't just weapons, they were marvels of metallurgy centuries ahead of their time, forged from steel so pure it wouldn't be matched until the Industrial Revolution. Imagine the shock of a Frankish soldier in the year 900. His iron blade shattering against a Viking warrior's sword that flexed like a willow branch yet struck with the force of a thunderbolt. That was the power of an Ulfbert, a weapon so advanced it might as well have been crafted by gods. What set these swords apart was their crucible steel, a material so rare in medieval Europe that most smiths didn't even know it existed. While typical blades of the era were made from brittle, impure iron prone to bending or snapping, Ulfbert's contained carbon levels comparable to modern high-grade steel. This wasn't just incremental improvement, it was a quantum leap. Microscopic analysis reveals a near absence of slag, the impurities that weakened other swords, giving Ulfberts an almost supernatural resilience. They could be honed to razor sharpness without sacrificing durability, making them the closest thing to a lightsaber the Dark Ages ever saw. The mystery deepens when we consider where this steel came from. Europe's forges couldn't produce such quality until centuries later, leading historians on a trail that stretches thousands of miles east. The most plausible theory points to the Islamic world, where Persian and Central Asian smiths had mastered crucible steel techniques. Viking traders, famed for their far-reaching networks, likely acquired ingots of this cerric iron along the Volga trade routes, transporting them back to workshops where master smiths stamped them with the now legendary +V+T inscription. This wasn't just a signature, it was a brand, a mark of prestige that turned these swords into the medieval equivalent of luxury supercars. But owning an Ulfbert wasn't just about status, it was a battlefield game changer. Sagas describe these swords cleaving through shields and mail like parchment, their edges remaining sharp even after dozens of clashes. In an era where most fights ended with broken or blunted weapons, an Ulfbert-wielding warrior could fight relentlessly, his blade singing through the air without fear of failure. The psychological impact was just as potent. Seeing an opponent draw a gleaming Ulfbert, its fuller groove catching the light, its fuller groove whispering of otherworldly craftsmanship, could drain the courage from even the hardiest foes. What truly fascinates scholars today isn't just the swords themselves, but the lost knowledge they represent. Only around 170 Ulfberts have been found, suggesting production was tightly controlled, perhaps by a single guild or family. The abrupt disappearance of new Ulfberts after the 12th century hints at a trade route severed or a workshop destroyed, leaving behind fragments of a technology that wouldn't resurface for another 500 years. Modern blacksmiths have attempted recreations using period-accurate methods, yet none fully replicate the original's mystical balance of flexibility and hardness. In the end, the Ulfbert stands as a testament to Viking ingenuity, not just as raiders, but as global citizens who connected distant cultures through trade and technology. These swords didn't just make warriors deadly, they rewrote the rules of medieval combat, proving that even in an age of brute force, innovation could carve legends into the steel of history. And somewhere in the soil, perhaps another Ulfbert waits to be found, its secret still sharp enough to cut through the veil of time. The Chachram wasn't just a weapon, it was a gleaming circle of death, humming through the air with the precision of a guided missile centuries before such technology existed. Crafted from razor-thin steel and sharpened to a monomolecular edge, these Indian throwing discs could travel over 100 feet, slicing through flesh, armor, and even bone before returning to their wielder's hand like a lethal boomerang. What made them truly terrifying wasn't just their cutting power, but how they defied conventional combat logic. Unlike arrows or spears that followed predictable trajectories, a skilled warrior could curve a chakram's flight path around shields or obstacles, striking enemies who thought they were safely out of line of sight. Sikh warriors, the chakram's most famous masters, treated these discs as extensions of their own bodies. Historical accounts describe fighters carrying up to a dozen chakrams looped around their turbans or threaded along their arms, ready to be unleashed in rapid succession. The spinning motion amplified their cutting force. Think of the difference between pressing a knife against skin versus drawing it swiftly across. Now imagine that force multiplied by rotation, turning what looked like simple metal rings into whirling saw blades capable of decapitating foes mid-charge. Some variants even featured serrated edges or inner grooves designed to whistle as they flew, adding psychological terror to their physical devastation. But the real genius of the chakram lay in its versatility. Close quarters, a warrior could grip it like a knuckle duster, using the sharpened rim to parry blades or slash at exposed limbs. Mid-range, it became a projectile with the stopping power of a bullet. Even in defensive scenarios, chakrams could be rolled along the ground to slice at attackers' legs or ricocheted off walls to strike from unexpected angles. This adaptability made it a favorite of the legendary Sikh Akali Nihang warriors, who often paired it with their iconic Kirpan daggers for a deadly combination of ranged and melee dominance. Training to master the chakram was an art form in itself. Unlike European archery, which relied on stationary targets, chakram throwers practiced on moving dummies suspended from trees, learning to calculate wind resistance, spin velocity, and rebound angles with near mathematical precision. The best could bank shots off multiple surfaces or land a disc at the exact spot where an enemy's neck would be 3 seconds later. This wasn't just throwing, it was predictive warfare, a blend of physics and intuition that turned circular metal into an unstoppable force. Modern tests with replica chakrams reveal just how advanced they were. High-speed cameras show the discs maintaining stability even after striking obstacles, their gyroscopic spin preventing tumbling that would lessen cutting impact. Martial artists who have studied ancient techniques can still sever bamboo stalks cleanly at 30 paces, proving these weren't just ceremonial toys but precision-engineered killing tools. Even today, the chakram's legacy lives on not just in museums, but in the circular saws and rotary blades that power modern industry, unknowingly echoing a design perfected by warriors centuries ago. The next time you see something spin, remember, sometimes the deadliest innovations come full circle. The katana wasn't forged, it was born, folded hundreds of times in fires so precise that the steel itself seemed to breathe. Unlike the heavy broadswords of Europe or the slashing sabers of the Middle East, this Japanese masterpiece balanced lethality with elegance, its gentle curve allowing for draw cuts so fluid they could bisect a falling silk scarf midair. But what truly set the katana apart wasn't just its blade, it was the philosophy hammered into every inch of its creation. To a samurai, this sword wasn't merely a tool, it was his soul-given physical form, a sacred bond between warrior and craft that began the moment the smith purified himself in ritual before lighting the forge. The secret to the katana's deadly efficiency lay in its differential hardening process, a technique so advanced it bordered on alchemy. By coating the blade's spine in a thick layer of clay before quenching, smiths created a weapon with two distinct personalities, a razor-sharp edge harder than glass, backed by a spine as flexible as spring steel. This contrast allowed the katana to slice through bamboo armor without snapping, absorbing the shock of combat while maintaining its lethal edge. Modern metallurgists still marvel at the precision of these ancient methods, some blades showing carbon gradients that would challenge even today's nanotechnology. Samurai didn't just wield katanas, they conversed with them. Training began in childhood with wooden bokken replacing toys and progressed to the art of aijutsu, the lightning-fast draw and strike that could end a duel before most opponents cleared their scabbards. Historical accounts describe masters cutting down multiple enemies in the space of a heartbeat, their movements so refined they appeared effortless. This wasn't brute strength, it was kinetic poetry, every angle of the blade's curve optimized to guide the cut along the most efficient path. Even the way a samurai wore his katana, edge up in the sash, allowed for faster deployment, turning casual strolls into potential death sentences for anyone foolish enough to provoke him. Beyond its battlefield prowess, the katana became a cultural lodestone. The famed swordsmith Masamune's creations were so revered that legends claimed they could distinguish between good and evil, refusing to draw blood unjustly. Daimyo lords would gift specially commissioned blades as symbols of trust, while dishonored samurai often chose to end their lives with their own katana rather than live without it. This spiritual dimension elevated the sword beyond metal. It was a mirror reflecting its owner's character, its polish revealing every flaw in both blade and soul. The katana's influence didn't fade with the age of samurai. During World War II, Japanese officers still carried family blades into battle, their presence bolstering morale even against machine guns. Today, its legacy lives on in everything from martial arts dojos to blockbuster films, a testament to how one culture's perfect weapon can cut across centuries. But perhaps its greatest lesson is this: true innovation isn't just about creating something deadly, but about infusing it with meaning so profound that steel becomes legend. Among the humid jungles and towering pyramids of Mesoamerica, the Aztecs perfected a weapon that defied every convention of Old World warfare, the Macuahutel. At first glance, it resembled a simple wooden paddle, but embedded along its edges were rows of obsidian blades, each shard sharper than surgical steel. This wasn't just a club, it was a chainsaw centuries before the invention of machinery, capable of decapitating horses in a single swing, according to horrified Spanish conquistadors. Unlike metal swords that dulled over time, the Macuahutel's obsidian could be replaced, ensuring every warrior always fought with a fresh, lethally honed edge. What made this weapon truly unique was how it mirrored Aztec combat philosophy. While European armies sought to kill, the Aztecs valued capturing enemies alive for ritual sacrifice, a practice that required precision over brute force. The Macuahutel's design allowed warriors to control their strikes, delivering deep, debilitating wounds without always fatal results. Spanish accounts describe how Aztec fighters could disarm opponents with a single well-placed slash, severing tendons or fingers while leaving vital organs intact. This wasn't random violence, it was martial artistry, turning battles into calculated performances where skill mattered more than sheer bloodshed. The obsidian blades themselves were feats of ancient engineering. Volcanic glass harvested from quarries across Mexico, each fragment was knapped to a molecular edge far finer than any steel alloy of the time. Modern tests show these blades could achieve a cutting edge just 3 nanometers thick, 300 times sharper than a razor. When set into the Macuahutel's grooved wooden frame and secured with plant resins and leather bindings, they created a weapon that balanced lightweight maneuverability with horrifying efficiency. A single downward stroke could split a wooden shield in half, while a horizontal swing might cleave through multiple limbs. Psychological terror was another layer of the Macuahutel's effectiveness. Imagine facing a warrior whose weapon glittered like black ice in the sunlight, its jagged teeth promising agony rather than quick death. The sound alone was unnerving. Obsidian blades created a distinctive whistling noise when swung at speed, a chorus of impending doom that preceded the Aztec battle cry. Spanish chronicler Bernal Diaz del Castillo wrote of his comrades' armor being cut to ribbons by these weapons, their steel breastplates offering little protection against the Macuahutel's surgical strikes. Even horses, introduced by the Spanish as living tanks, fell victim to Aztec warriors who learned to aim for the animal's legs, toppling riders into waiting hands. Yet the Macuahutel's legacy extends beyond its battlefield prowess. Its construction reveals the Aztecs' sophisticated understanding of material science. Obsidian, though brittle, was abundant and easier to sharpen than metal in a region lacking iron deposits. The weapon's modular design also reflected Mesoamerican values. Warriors often customized their Macuahutels with carvings or feathers, transforming tools of war into expressions of identity. Modern martial artists attempting to reconstruct its techniques discover how ergonomically advanced it was. The slight curve of the wooden body allowed for fluid, wrist-driven motions that maximized cutting power with minimal effort. In the end, the Macuahutel stands as a testament to innovation born from necessity. While Europe swung steel swords, the Aztecs redefined close-quarters combat with a weapon that turned volcanic glass into an instrument of controlled devastation. It wasn't just a tool for fighting, it was a cultural statement, proof that brilliance could flourish even when resources differed from the rest of the world. And that's the real lesson of the Macuahutel. Sometimes, the deadliest innovations aren't about having the same materials as everyone else, but about seeing the potential in what others overlook. The Hoplon shield wasn't just protection, it was the beating heart of Greek warfare. a bronze-clad circle that transformed farmers and blacksmiths into an immovable wall of defiance. Weighing around 15 pounds and spanning 3 feet across, this concave marvel covered a soldier from chin to knee, its rim reinforced with bronze to shatter enemy spears on impact. But the true genius of the Hoplon wasn't its size or strength. It was how it turned individuality into unity. When phalanx formations advanced, each man's shield overlapped his neighbor's, creating a seamless barrier where no gap existed, a living fortress that moved as one. Picture the moment before battle, hundreds of hoplites crouching behind their shields, the air thick with the smell of sweat and oiled bronze. At the command, they'd rise in unison, their spears leveling over the shield wall like a bristling hedge of death. This wasn't just a defensive tactic, it was psychological domination. Enemy forces accustomed to chaotic skirmishes now faced a seemingly impenetrable bronze tide, advancing with mechanical precision. The Spartans perfected this to an art, their synchronized steps shaking the earth as they marched slow, deliberate, and utterly terrifying. Even Persians, with their numerical superiority at Thermopylae, found themselves helpless against the disciplined push of hoplite shields, their curved daggers useless against a wall that refused to break. What made the Hoplon revolutionary was its dual grip system. Unlike shields hung from straps, the Hoplon had a central armband for the forearm and a hand grip near the rim. This design allowed soldiers to actively manipulate their shields, deflecting blows with angled precision while maintaining formation. If a hoplite fell, his shield didn't drop. It became a stepping stone for the ranks behind him. The concave shape also served a clever purpose. Arrows and javelins that struck its surface would ricochet harmlessly away rather than embedding themselves. Modern tests show that a properly angled hoplon could even deflect stones hurled by siege engines, a testament to Greek engineering foresight. Beyond the battlefield, the hoplon symbolized civic duty. Every citizen soldier purchased his own shield, often inscribing it with his city's emblem, the lambda of Sparta or the owl of Athens. To lose one in combat was the ultimate disgrace. Survivors who abandoned theirs faced ostracization, as the poet Archilochus famously lamented. This cultural pressure forged an unbreakable bond between warrior and shield, where protecting one's poleis meant literally holding the line. Even the word hoplite derived from hoplon, reinforcing how inseparable the soldier was from his most vital tool. The shield's influence echoed far beyond Greece. Roman legions adopted its phalanx principles before evolving into manipular tactics, while Renaissance military theorists studied hoplite formations to inspire pike and shot infantry. Modern riot police still use shield walls eerily reminiscent of ancient phalanxes, proving that some innovations transcend millennia. Yet perhaps the hoplon's greatest legacy was proving that courage alone doesn't win wars. It's the willingness to stand shoulder to shoulder, turning individual strength into collective invincibility. When those bronze circles locked together, they didn't just defend cities, they defined Western warfare itself. The fire lance didn't just introduce gunpowder to the battlefield, it unleashed a revolution wrapped in smoke and flame. Picture a Song dynasty soldier in the year 900, clutching what looked like a simple bamboo pole until a spark touched its core and the world changed forever. This was no ordinary spear. Its hollow core packed a volatile mix of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, ignited to spew jets of fire and jagged porcelain shards at point-blank range. For the first time in history, warriors could kill without swinging a blade or drawing a bow, just a flick of flame that turned melee combat into something far more terrifying. What set the fire lance apart wasn't just its destructive power, but its eerie unpredictability. Early versions functioned like handheld flamethrowers, projecting searing bursts up to 10 feet, enough to engulf an enemy's face or set their armor ablaze. Later iterations packed scrap metal, nails, or even toxic chemicals like arsenic into the barrel, creating a lethal shotgun effect that could mow down entire ranks in a single gout of fire. Ming Dynasty manuals describe soldiers using these weapons in coordinated volleys, their synchronized blast turning bridge crossings or mountain passes into kill zones where no shield or armor could protect the unfortunate souls caught in the storm. The Fire Lance's true genius lay in its simplicity. Unlike complex siege engines or expensive swords, these weapons could be mass-produced by village blacksmiths. Bamboo tubes gave way to reinforced metal barrels, while crude fuses evolved into timed ignition systems resembling modern matchlocks. Archaeologists have unearthed specimens with multiple chambers, allowing for successive shots, a primitive ancestor to today's revolving firearms. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a living laboratory, each iteration inching closer to the age of guns. Yet perhaps its most lasting impact was psychological. Imagine being a Mongol horseman charging a Song defensive line, only to face a wall of fire lances erupting in unison. The noise alone, a thunderous cacophony of explosions and screams, shattered the steppe warriors' legendary discipline, their mounts panicking at smells and sounds no amount of training could prepare them for. For centuries, cavalry had ruled the battlefield. Now, a peasant with a tube of powder could level the playing field in an instant. The Fire Lance's legacy burns bright in every modern firearm, from pistols to artillery. Its basic principle, contained combustion propelling a projectile, became the DNA of warfare for the next millennium. But its greatest lesson wasn't technological, it was ideological. By proving that innovation could trump tradition, the Fire Lance didn't just change how wars were fought, it challenged who could fight them, igniting a chain reaction that would eventually democratize destruction itself. While Rome built roads and Greece perfected phalanxes, the Celts mastered something far more dynamic: the war chariot, a thunderous fusion of speed and terror that turned battlefields into chaotic whirlwinds. These weren't the heavy scythed chariots of Persia or the ceremonial platforms of Egypt. Celtic designs were stripped-down marvels of bent wood and wicker, so light a single horse could pull them at breakneck speeds. Imagine the shock of Roman legionaries seeing these vehicles careen across uneven terrain, their spoked wheels barely touching the ground as warriors balanced like acrobats, ready to strike. What made Celtic chariots revolutionary was their two-person teamwork, a driver with reflexes honed by years of hunting, and a warrior armed with javelins, swords, or even a sling. Approaching enemy lines at full tilt, the fighter would hurl projectiles before the chariot pivoted sharply, retreating just as quickly as it came. This wasn't just mobility, it was psychological warfare. Roman accounts describe the demoralizing effect of these hit-and-run assaults, where entire cohorts found themselves peppered with attacks but had no way to retaliate against an enemy that vanished like mist. The chariot's noise alone was weaponized, iron-rimmed wheels and jangling harnesses creating a cacophony designed to unsettle both men and horses. The chariot's agility stemmed from ingenious engineering. Unlike heavier Mediterranean designs, Celtic versions used flexible woods like ash for the frames, allowing them to absorb shocks from rough terrain without splintering. The axle placement was equally clever, positioned farther forward than in other cultures' models. It improved balance during sharp turns. Even the wheels were masterclasses in efficiency. 12 spokes instead of the usual 8 reduced weight while maintaining strength, a detail archaeologists have confirmed from preserved bog finds. But the true brilliance lay in how the Celts integrated chariots with infantry. Unlike the Romans, who saw chariots as outdated relics after encountering them in Britain, Celtic tribes used them as mobile command posts and rapid response units. A chieftain could survey the battlefield from his chariot, then dismount to join the fray while his driver circled, ready for extraction. This fluidity baffled rigid Roman formations, as documented by Julius Caesar during his Gallic campaigns. At the Battle of the Sabis, Celtic chariots disrupted legionary lines so effectively that it took disciplined shield walls and caltrops to finally neutralize them. The chariot's legacy outlived its battlefield dominance. Its design principles, lightweight materials, shock absorption, and rapid redeployment echo in modern special forces vehicles and even rally cars. More importantly, it proved that innovation isn't always about bigger or stronger tools, but about mastering movement itself. When those wicker frames raced across ancient Europe, they didn't just carry warriors, they carried the future of warfare, leaving even Rome's mighty legions scrambling to adapt. The thunderous roar of the Dardanel's gun didn't just breach walls, it shattered an era, cast from 20 tons of bronze and requiring 60 oxen to transport. This Ottoman masterpiece could hurl stone balls weighing over half a ton, nearly a mile, their impact reducing centuries-old fortifications to rubble in hours. When Mehmed II laid siege to Constantinople in 1453, his engineers didn't just bring cannons, they unleashed a calculated revolution in destruction. The Byzantines, trusting in their legendary Theodosian walls untouched for 1,000 years, found themselves facing an enemy who had rewritten the rules of siegecraft overnight. What made Ottoman artillery so devastating wasn't just its size, but its precision. Hungarian engineer Urban, originally hired by the Byzantines, defected to the Ottomans and perfected a casting technique that minimized bronze imperfections, allowing these monstrous guns to fire repeatedly without cracking. Each shot was a spectacle of logistics, crews of 200 men maneuvering the barrel into position, while teams of oxen hauled pre-measured stone spheres to the firing line. The psychological toll was as calculated as the engineering. Constantinople's defenders reportedly suffered strokes from the sheer vibration of impacts, their eardrums bursting as the city's defenses crumbled section by section. The siege itself became a grim showcase of tactical innovation. Mehmed positioned his guns in staggered batteries, concentrating fire on single wall segments until they collapsed, then shifting to new targets before repairs could begin. Unlike previous sieges where trebuchets took weeks to weaken defenses, Ottoman cannons achieved in days what traditional methods couldn't in months. When the giant basilica cannon cracked from overuse, Mehmed Smith simply recast it on site, a mobile foundry operation that stunned observers. This wasn't just firepower, it was industrial warfare born 4 centuries early. Beyond Constantinople, the Dardanelles' guns' legacy echoed across Europe. Within decades, star forts with angled bastions replaced vertical walls, their sloped designs engineered to deflect cannon shots. The Ottomans themselves became the foremost artillery power of their age, their guns dominating battles from the Balkans to the Persian Gulf. Yet perhaps the greatest testament to their innovation lies in what survived. The Dardanelles gun itself remained in service for over 300 years, last fired in 1807, still capable of striking fear into enemies long after its creators had turned to dust. In the end, these bronze behemoths didn't just conquer a city, they marked the close of an epoch, where Greek fire and siege towers had once defined warfare's limits. Now the raw physics of gunpowder and metallurgy held sway. The age of castles and knights yielded to one of engineers and gunners, proof that even the mightiest walls must eventually fall before the relentless march of innovation. The Ikelwa wasn't just a spear, it was the heartbeat of the Zulu Empire, a weapon so brutally efficient that its name came from the sound it made when pulled from a victim's body, Ikelwa. Unlike the long, unwieldy throwing spears used by other African tribes, this compact marvel was designed for one purpose: close quarters annihilation. With a broad, leaf-shaped blade nearly a foot long mounted on a stout 3-foot shaft, it transformed the chaos of melee combat into a surgical exercise. Shaka Zulu, the warrior king who revolutionized Zulu warfare, didn't just adopt this weapon, he reimagined entire battle strategies around it, turning disciplined formations of Ikelwa armed impis into the shock troops of southern Africa. What made the Ikelwa devastating wasn't its size, but how it amplified Zulu tactics. Traditional African warfare had relied on ritualized skirmishes with thrown spears, but Shaka's reforms turned battles into close-range massacres. His warriors would advance in the buffalo horns formation, a crescent-shaped attack that enveloped enemies while the main force drove forward like the beast's head. At the critical moment, the impis would drop their lighter throwing spears and close in with Ikelwas, their shorter length allowing rapid, repeated thrusts to the torso. Historical accounts describe how Zulu fighters could deliver half a dozen lethal strikes in the time it took an opponent to swing a longer weapon once. The Ikelwa's broad blade created ghastly wounds that bled out quickly, while its sturdy shaft could parry or hook enemy limbs with brutal efficiency. Training with the Ikelwa was as much about psychology as technique. Young Zulu warriors practiced against woven dummies, learning to strike upward beneath ribcage or twist the blade after penetration to maximize damage. The goal wasn't just to kill, it was to dominate. A well-executed Ikelwa thrust could lift an enemy off the ground before dropping them like discarded meat, a spectacle designed to shatter morale. British soldiers at the Battle of Isandlwana in 1879 learned this the hard way when thousands of Zulus overran their positions. Ikelwas flashing in the sunlight as they methodically silenced rifle volleys with close-quarter butchery. Even with superior firearms, the redcoats stood little chance once the impis closed the gap. The spear's influence extended beyond the battlefield. Its adoption mirrored Shaka's societal reforms, where older warriors had fought as individuals. The Ikelwa required tight coordination. Just as Roman Gladius tactics demanded shield-wall discipline, Zulu squads moved as unified entities, their short spears allowing dense formations that overwhelmed disorganized foes. Modern military historians note eerie parallels between Zulu maneuvers and riot police tactics, both relying on controlled advances and precise, repetitive strikes. Even the Ikelwa's design found echoes centuries later in trench knives of World War I, proving that sometimes the most effective innovations are those that embrace simplicity over complexity. Yet the Ikelwa's true legacy lies in how it defied expectations. In an era when longer weapons were seen as superior, Shaka proved that compact brutality could rewrite the rules of engagement. His impis didn't just win battles, they redefined warfare itself, demonstrating that discipline and the right tool could turn herdsmen into empire builders. And that's the enduring lesson of the Ikelwa. True mastery isn't about the length of your blade, but how decisively you wield it. The Swiss pike didn't just dominate battlefields, it rewrote the geometry of warfare itself. Stretching up to 18 feet of tempered ash wood tipped with a lethal iron spearhead, this seemingly simple weapon became the backbone of Renaissance Europe's deadliest infantry formations. Unlike the shorter sarissas of Alexander's era or the ceremonial spears of medieval knights, the Swiss pike was engineered for one brutal purpose: to turn disciplined farmers into an unstoppable human bulldozer. When thousands of these weapons leveled in unison, they created a forest of steel that could stop charging cavalry dead in their tracks or roll over enemy infantry like a tidal wave of pointed death. Swiss mercenaries didn't just carry pikes, they worshipped them. From childhood, boys in the Alpine cantons trained with weighted practice poles, drilling relentlessly to perfect the three core motions: the advance, the halt, and the deadly push. By adulthood, they could maneuver these cumbersome weapons with the precision of a conductor's baton, their formations shifting from defensive squares to offensive wedges at the snap of a command. The secret wasn't individual skill, but collective synchronization. Picture a phalanx of 5,000 men moving as a single organism, each pike angled at the exact same height, advancing in lockstep to the rhythm of drumbeats. Against such cohesion, even the proudest French knights or Burgundian men at arms stood little chance. The Battle of Nancy in 1477 proved this brutally. Charles the Bold of Burgundy, clad in the finest plate armor money could buy, was found dead in a frozen ditch, his body punctured by dozens of pike wounds after his cavalry charge shattered against Swiss lines. What made the pike formations revolutionary was their adaptability. While most armies relied on static defensive lines, Swiss mercenaries attacked with shocking speed, their tightly packed columns capable of marching uphill or through rough terrain without losing cohesion. Contemporary accounts describe their advances as irresistible, comparing them to avalanches once set in motion. Nothing could divert their momentum. The pike's length allowed rear ranks to add their weight to the push, creating a physical force that could literally shove enemy formations off the battlefield. And when combat dissolved into chaos, Swiss fighters could shorten their grip on the pike shaft, transforming it into a brutal quarterstaff for close quarters bludgeoning. The psychological impact was equally devastating. Facing a Swiss pike square meant confronting what one Italian commander called a wall of needles moving with one mind. Horses reared at the sight, refusing to charge the bristling thicket of spear points, while infantry who'd trained to duel with swords found themselves hopelessly outranged. Even early firearms struggled against these formations. Musket balls might fell a front-line pikeman, but the ranks behind would simply close the gap and keep advancing. This reputation made Swiss mercenaries the hottest commodity in European warfare for nearly 2 centuries, their services auctioned to the highest bidder from Milan to Flanders. Kings and popes alike coveted these Alpine fighters, knowing a single Swiss contract could tip the balance of power in their favor. Remarkably, the pike's influence outlasted the Renaissance. Well into the gunpowder age, armies like the Spanish tercios combined pikes with muskets in hybrid formations, using the spears to protect vulnerable shooters during reloading. The bayonet itself was essentially a miniaturized pike, marrying the weapon's melee dominance with firearm technology. Modern military historians still study Swiss tactics, recognizing their pike squares as precursors to today's combined arms doctrine, proof that sometimes the simplest innovations endure because they tap into something timeless, the power of unity over individualism. When those Alpine farmers lowered their pikes in unison, they weren't just fighting for pay, they were demonstrating that discipline and coordination could make even the humblest weapon into a force that shaped empires. The tomahawk wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of the warrior's will, a seamless blend of utility and lethality that could shift from tool to terror in a heartbeat. Unlike the heavy European battle axes designed solely for brute force, this Native American innovation balanced form and function with breathtaking elegance. Carved from hickory or ash and fitted with a stone or later iron head, its lightweight design allowed for fluid motion, whether hurled across a battlefield with pinpoint accuracy or wielded in the chaotic dance of close combat. But what truly set the tomahawk apart wasn't its construction. It was the philosophy behind its use. To indigenous warriors, every movement was purposeful, every strike a calculated act of survival rather than mere destruction. Mastering the tomahawk demanded a lifetime of discipline. Young boys practiced by throwing at rolling hoops or suspended targets, honing their ability to judge distance and rotation. By adulthood, a skilled warrior could land a spinning tomahawk directly between an enemy's eyes at 30 paces, or use its blunt backside to disarm an opponent without killing, a tactic prized during ritualized conflicts. The weapon's versatility shone brightest in surprise attacks. Silent throws from concealed positions could decimate enemy ranks before melee even began. European settlers learned this the hard way during frontier skirmishes, where tomahawks seemed to materialize from nowhere, striking down riflemen before they could reload. Beyond its battlefield prowess, the tomahawk carried deep cultural significance. Pipe tomahawks featuring a hollowed-out handle and bowl became ceremonial objects, symbolizing both war and diplomacy. Tribes like the Lakota and Iroquois adorned them with feathers and carvings, transforming tools of war into storytelling artifacts. This duality reflected indigenous values. The same hand that wielded a tomahawk in battle might later use it to chop wood for a communal feast. Even the act of throwing one wasn't purely aggressive. Competitions showcasing accuracy and style strengthened bonds between warriors, much like medieval jousts did for European knights. The tomahawk's legacy endures in modern combat. Special forces units from the U.S. to Australia have adopted tactical tomahawks for breaching doors, cutting through obstacles, and silent close-quarters engagements, proving that centuries-old designs still outperform high-tech alternatives in certain scenarios. Martial artists study Native American throwing techniques for their fluid biomechanics, while blacksmiths replicate historic designs with meticulous accuracy. Yet perhaps its greatest impact was philosophical. In an age where weapons grew increasingly specialized, the tomahawk stood as a reminder that true innovation often lies in adaptability. From the forests of the Ohio Valley to the deserts of Afghanistan, its story continues to be written not just in steel and wood, but in the enduring idea that the best tools serve multiple masters equally well. From the liquid terror of Greek fire to the disciplined might of Swiss pike formations, these 20 innovations didn't just change weapons, they rewrote the rules of warfare itself. Each breakthrough, whether forged in bronze or carved from obsidian, turned ordinary fighters into forces that could defy empires and reshape history. But beyond their battlefield dominance, these tools reveal something deeper about human ingenuity. The relentless drive to push boundaries, to transform limitations into advantages, and to find new ways to protect, conquer, and survive. Consider how these ancient superweapons echo in today's military technology. The precision of Mongol composite bows lives on in guided missiles, while the psychological impact of Aztec Macuahutels finds its counterpart in modern non-lethal weapons designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Even the Swiss pike's emphasis on unity and coordination foreshadowed today's networked warfare, where drones and satellites act as digital extensions of human soldiers. The thread connecting past to present isn't just about destruction. It's about the unbroken chain of innovation, where each generation stands on the shoulders of those who came before. These weapons also remind us that true power often lies in adaptation. The Roman Gladius succeeded not because it was the flashiest blade, but because it perfectly matched the tactics of its time. Similarly, the English longbow triumphed through simplicity and accessibility, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are those that empower the many rather than the elite. In an age of increasingly complex technology, there's wisdom in remembering that innovation doesn't always mean complication. It means solving problems in ways no one else has imagined. As we close this exploration, think about the hands that once gripped these weapons not as distant historical figures, but as people who faced challenges not so different from our own. Their solutions, born of necessity and creativity, still resonate today. If you found this journey as fascinating as we did, let us know in the comments which ancient superweapon amazed you most. And for more deep dives into history's most game-changing innovations, don't forget to subscribe. The past is full of surprises, and we're just getting